Upon the arrival of the digital camera, professional photographers harumphed that blank produced ugly, low-resolution images. So here we've got a pronoun, and we need to see what is the antecedent to this pronoun. What is this pronoun supposed to be referring to? What noun is it replacing? So we look earlier in the passage, what was it that produced ugly, low-resolution images? Seems like it's the digital camera that produced those images. And so therefore, digital camera is singular. That's the thing that's producing these images. It's one camera, singular camera. So anything plural is out. That gets rid of A. Can't be he or she. That's for people. One, as we've discussed previously, typically not going to be right on questions like these. And so we're good with it. Singular pronoun it is our answer. All right, so in 24, we want to add the sentence and determine where to add it. So looking at the sentence, pretty short. Why wouldn't they? So this has got to follow something that would justify a question like this. Why wouldn't they what? That better be well established in the sentences. So we look at sentence 1. That's a sentence about how they were annoyed by the low images. Why wouldn't they harumph? I don't know. I mean, when you look as well at the 1 to 2 connection, the 1 to 2 connection seems to be pretty strong. So inserting this in between 1 and 2 doesn't seem like a good idea, especially since it doesn't really work with 1 very well. How about 2? Yet eventually, the vast majority of them traded film for megapixels. Why wouldn't they? The latest digital cameras take pictures so crisp, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, okay, that's pretty good. Why wouldn't they? In other words, why wouldn't they trade in their film for megapixels, for film for digital? The latest digital cameras take pictures so crisp. So sort of explaining why they did it, or why it was almost inevitable that they would turn in their film cameras in exchange for digital. So B's looking good. Looking at sentence 4, this doesn't really follow very well after sentence 4. There's nobody in sentence 4 that was doing something that we're sort of emphasizing with this sentence. So not going to be that one. And then how about after 5? Here it talks about wet plate photography, like an old method of photography that they're embracing. But are we emphasizing here what these old few contemporary photographers are doing? Does this sentence make sense following it? Not really. You can also look at the next paragraph, and this is not going to flow logically into the next paragraph, whereas sentence 5 is going to flow very well into the next paragraph. So best answer here is B. In 25, do we want to add this sentence? Let's see. Wet plate photographers essentially create their own film. The process can be dangerous, given that it requires the use of several volatile chemicals. It's also labor-intensive, involving several intricate steps. To take a wet plate photograph, photographers usually first arrange or ... Okay, so this is interesting. It seems to be adding something of value. It's talking about how this process, the process to make their own film, is labor-intensive and requiring many steps, and what's going to follow but the description of those very steps. So this sentence nicely connects to the previous ideas and transitions into what follows. So we're going to want to add this. We'll get rid of the nose. Yes, because it sets up the paragraph's outline of the process of wet plate photography. Yeah, right. It's telling us that there's several intricate steps, which are going to be explained in what follows. So I like B. Yes, because it serves as an effective transition by reiterating the main idea of the first paragraph. I think it's a pretty good transition. I don't think that's the issue. That's pretty good. But does this reiterate the main idea of the previous paragraph? Is that what we read in the previous paragraph? No, this wasn't introduced there at all. So let's drop A, go with choice B. 26, another pronoun question. To take a wet plate photograph, photographers usually first arrange or pose its subject. So first things first, its is the wrong its here. This is the its that stands for it is. And if you plug in it is, it just doesn't sound good. Similarly, this is the wrong there in choice C, T-H-E-R-E. That's the there for place. Here we're looking for a pronoun, either its without the apostrophe or there, plural. So we have to determine, is this singular or plural? As we've seen multiple times in this test, is this pronoun referring to something singular or something plural? So who is it that is possessing the subjects? Who is posing subjects? It's the photographers. It's the photographers' subjects that they're posing. And so photographers is plural, so we got to go with the plural there. Choice D. In 27, the issue here is not of grammar. This is a properly composed pair of sentences connected with a comma and a conjunction. The issue is it the right conjunction? Does the logic, the meaning of the conjunction make sense here? Looking at the sentence, dried collodion is unusable. So once the photo is snapped with a massive tripod-mounted camera, the photographer has a few minutes to develop it using more chemicals. All right, so does this so make sense? So is used to show cause and effect. The previous part of this says that dried collodion is unusable. So once the photo is snapped, what does it say? The photographer has a few minutes, or a mere minutes, to develop it using more chemicals. That sort of fits with that first sentence, right? The first sentence says you can't let it dry. You have to, once it's set up, you gotta go and develop it. Otherwise, it's unusable. So actually works here logically. Looking at but, that shows contrast. We don't want contrast. And it's not terrible. It's connecting these sentences. They are in the similar direction. But it's not specific enough as so, right? Because this is true, so this other thing will happen. Now, for also shows a kind of cause and effect, but it reverses the causal arrow. When you use for, you're saying that the thing following the for is the condition that causes the thing in the first sentence. But here, it's the first sentence, this reality, that leads to this effect. This is the cause, and this is the effect. And that's what so does. So connects cause and then effect. Whereas for, you start with the effect and you go to the cause after the for. That's how for is used. And so that's why ultimately we're going to go with choice A here. They're both cause and effect, but A has it in the right direction. The writer wants to emphasize how quickly wet plate photographs have to work. Which choice most effectively accomplishes this goal? So which of these show how quickly they have to work? So the photographer has nominal minutes. That's just the wrong word. I mean, the meaning is in sort of the right direction, but the usage is off there. A few minutes, that's pretty good. Does it emphasize exactly how quickly they have to work? Maybe a little bit. A few minutes isn't very long, but let's see what else there is. The photographer has a matter of minutes. Okay, so again, like a few, emphasizing that it's like a relatively short period of time. How about D? The photographer has mere minutes to develop it. Notice the importance here of D, why D ends up being the answer. It is the one of these three choices that are remaining that most emphasizes the quickness, that minutes is not a lot of time. It is mere minutes, right? That, if you say a few minutes, is that a lot or is that a little? I mean, it could be a little, it could be a lot. It just sort of depends on the context. Like if I say to you, I'll give you a few minutes to work it out. That could mean that's enough time or it's not enough time. I mean, it just depends. A matter of minutes can also imply sort of the same thing either way. But mere, if I tell you I'm going to give you mere minutes to answer this, I'm emphasizing that's not a lot of time, so you better get going. And that's why D is the answer. It gives the question what it wants. Thinking of our rhetorical principles, give the question what it wants. And so here, D does the job best. 29, we've got a transitional or opening word question. So which of these is going to connect this sentence to the previous? So the previous paragraph is all talking about the process for developing one of these photos. So what's the sentence here? In conclusion, it is coated with lavender oil to give it a protective finish. Well, this is not really conclusion. This is more the last step of the process. And so when I see finally makes sense. I'm giving a list of steps. This is the final step. It's not really a concluding sentence. You wouldn't use in conclusion or thus. It's not contrasting like you would need to with choice D, nevertheless. It is the last step of a series of steps. And so there finally is most appropriate. 30, we want to decide how to deal with this phrase, a protective finish. And here, reading the sentence, it is coated with lavender oil to give it a protective finish. This is not non-essential information. This is essential to understanding the sentence. Otherwise, if this were something you could ignore because it's non-essential, the sentence doesn't make sense. Remove it. It is coated with lavender oil to give it. Okay, give it what? Well, give it a protective finish. So no parentheses. Don't need any commas, don't need this dash. We can just continue the sentence straight through. Here's a case where just because you've got choices with punctuation doesn't mean you need to pick punctuation. Sometimes nothing is the best option, as it is here. This is essential to the sentence, and therefore no punctuation required to separate it. 31, we're dealing primarily with an issue of tense. And so looking at the other words in this paragraph and this sentence, So wet plate photos are, they seem, flaws appear, streaks emerge, and so on and so forth. We have all present tense. And so due to tense consistency, I would expect the tense of this verb to be similarly present, because we're talking about what these photos look like and how they develop. And so what's present tense? Well, swirl is present tense, matches the others. Will have swirled is a future tense. Have swirled is it's a present tense technically, but it's a little bit of a mixture of present and past, and I don't see any of that form elsewhere with the other verbs. And D is just pure simple past, and so that's why I'm going with choice A. 32 is all about concision and avoiding redundancy. The previous sentence says, since the film requires long exposures, moving subjects blur. Reading this sentence, a shifting arm or leg might even disappear because of the lengthy exposure time required. We've already established this. We've already established in the previous sentence that the film requires long exposures. We don't need to repeat that. A is redundant. It's saying something we've already established. B, same thing. The long exposure time, already established. C, same thing. Long exposure time, already established. These are all redundant and they're all wordy. And so what a surprise, the short choice wins. That is a trend. We do typically see the short choice end up being the right answer. And indeed, it's good because it's not redundant. It's not wordy. It's nice and concise. Makes the statement we need to make that because it requires a long exposure time, moving subjects blur. And so if you move an arm or leg, it might blur so much that you don't see it. That's all you need to say. And so shortest wins here, choice D. 33. On this one, you really want to pay close attention to what the question's looking for. They want us to highlight the contrast between Sternbach's techniques and the people Sternbach photographs. Remember, the gist of this passage is Sternbach is using this old style of photography, this wet plate photography back from the 19th century. But she's taking pictures of modern people in modern clothing, in modern equipment, surfers. So we look at the original. Her subjects could be 19th century wave riders, if not for the modern board shorts and bikinis they wear. And this looks good because we do have a contrast between the way that these subjects appear due to the form of photography. The photography makes them look old. The photographs look old and from the 19th century. But that appearance is belied by the clothing that they're wearing. Like, they look modern, even though the photography produces a photo that looks older. So A is looking pretty good. B doesn't really emphasize that contrast of time or of how her technique makes them look older, whereas they are wearing more modern materials. C, same thing. D, same thing. These three choices just don't really focus on the technique and the ways in which her technique looks older, produces photographs that look aged, even if her subjects are wearing modern attire. And so that's why A does the best job of giving the question what it wants.